Today, in teaching through the Bible, we are going to get into kind of an intense narrative here, and it's maybe interesting that it is a narrative, actually, at all, because the first 7 chapters weren't really narrative, more prescription, instruction, here's how to do things. Here, though, this narrative builds on what we've just seen and gives us instruction in narrative form. And here, actually, we're essentially getting a continuation of what we had. And you've got the sacrifices in the first 7 chapters. And that's great because, remember, we have this question, and how can an unholy people be with a holy God? We saw this this was a problem at the end of Exodus, right? But now we've seen these sacrifices, and the priests have been mentioned, but you don't have any priests yet, actually. There aren't any priests that can do this. So now we get that part. We have the sacrifices. Okay, how do you get the priests to do the sacrifices? That's going to be important. So we have 8 through 10, chapters 8 through 10 that we're looking at today. That's going to tell us how. And it starts with chapter 8 is sacrifices. Here's the whole process, right? All these sacrifices that have to be done for Aaron and his sons to become the first priests. And there's a whole long process. It's actually 8 days. You have 1 day, and then 7 days later, you have this all again. So day 1, you got the sin offering for the priest, you got the burnt offering for the priest, you got the consecration offering for the priest, and that's where we really see the specifics of that consecration offering. Something unique about that is how the blood is used. So the priest has to have blood taken and put on right earlobe, right thumb, right toe, what's going on there, with putting just a few spots basically where the blood goes. Well, they would do this that represented being covered in the blood. They didn't actually dump all like the blood of an animal on those people. They just put them in a few spots, and that represented the blood covering them all. Just like how we talked in the end of Exodus when we were looking at the different things that are in the tabernacle area. You have that basin, this big bowl basically of water. They needed to be washed clean of sin, right? And they didn't actually take a full bath. They washed their hands, they washed their feet, and that represented all of them being clean. This is very symbolic imagery here. So same thing with the blood. The blood is on them to show them being cleansed by a covering of this blood. And that you have these sacrifices. But then it says you're there for 7 days. Right, and then finally you do this next part of the ordination, which is interestingly you have not just the sacrifice for them, but for the people. So actually they finally get to begin that process themselves, because up to this point it's been Moses doing all this. Moses is the intermediary. He's the guy that's between God and his people, and he's the one having to do this stuff to initiate them basically. And so then you have Aaron, the high priest. Now he gets to do this. So he's asked to sacrifice a bull for his sin offering, and the ram for his burnt offering. And then he does similar things for the congregation. He sacrifices a male goat, a calf, and a lamb, and he's sacrificing these things. Sin offering, then a burnt offering, then a grain offering and a peace offering on top of that. That peace offering is an ox and a ram. So sacrificing all these sacrifices. So Moses has started this. He's the one that's been having to do this. He initiates Aaron as the high priest and his sons as priests. And now Aaron is able to take on the mantle. He's able to be the guy who's giving the sacrifices. But he has to start with himself. He has to start with him because he's a sinner. We've seen that. Remember Exodus 32, the golden calf. What happened there? he basically led all of the nation astray into totally just violating the covenant that they had just made. So totally not a great guy in that sense. He's not perfect by any means. But God chooses him anyways. He is the guy who's going to be the guy in between God and his people. And we see how Jesus is so much greater than that. In the book of Hebrews, it actually talks about how, well, yeah, like those priests back then, they had to sacrifice for themselves in addition to for everyone else. And they had to sacrifice all the time. We've seen it in these first chapters here. There's actually instances where it mentions certain sacrifices being morning and evening, morning and evening, morning and evening, morning and evening, every single day. There's no end to them. But Jesus, once for all, for everyone else, and not for himself, because he's sinless. So you have that whole process as they, in chapters 8 and 9, they are fulfilling this ordination ceremony. That means they're being initiated in as priests. They are going to be the people who now follow these instructions we're getting for the sacrifices and help lead God's people to be holy, which, this is kind of the point of Leviticus. How are they going to be with the holy God? Well, they have to at least ritually be holy and clean. And so this is really important. This is a really great moment that this is what's happening. And we see at the end of chapter 9, verse 22, starting in 22. So this is the last few verses here. Then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them. And he came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. And when they came out, they blessed the people. And the glory of Yahweh appeared to all the people. Now remember, this happened with the tabernacle. When they made the tabernacle, they did it exactly as they were supposed to. And God showed up over the tabernacle and dwelt in there. And Moses couldn't enter. Well, so the glory of Yahweh appeared to all the people, and fire came out from before Yahweh and consumed the burnt offering and the pieces of fat on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. So that's the end of chapter 9, where God accepts the offering. That's what's going on. The fire comes out and burns the offering because it's accepted. And that is great. That is awesome. All right, God has given them the thumbs up that we're good to go here. I accept what you've done. You guys are the priests. To which Aaron's sons promptly say, that's nice, cool, I'm going to do what I want. So chapter 10 begins. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it and offered unauthorized fire before Yahweh, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before Yahweh and consumed them, and they died before Yahweh. So, wow, that was a plot twist, right? That's a huge turn in the narrative. So Aaron does all these things he's supposed to. God accepts everything. We're good to go. And then his sons, he's got 4 sons, but 2 older sons. They say, well, all right, cool. Now that we're in, let's just do whatever exactly they were doing with unauthorized fire, whatever exactly that means. And God says, nope, that's not okay. And instead of sacrifice, an animal being consumed by God's fire, it is them. It is the priests themselves. So this follows up on what I said last lesson about how even though you have these people that God says these are the specific people I want doing this job, this is their role. It doesn't mean you get to do it however you feel like. It doesn't give you get out of jail free card. Oh no, it's okay. I'm a priest, so I can do nope. These guys, they're not doing it the way they're supposed to. God says, boom, roasted. This is not a light thing. This is not a silly thing. This is really serious. And he's showing it by what he did. God's showing this is serious. You got to take this serious. And you got to listen to what I'm saying to do. You can't just do it whatever way. So that's, big moment there and really awful. And of course, now Aaron, 2 of his kids just died. Adults, not little kids, but 2 of his sons are now dead. Now, he is still supposed to be doing, he's the high priest. He has to continue doing what he's called to do. He has to continue doing the sacrifices. There's no one else to do that. It's got to be him. And when he does, we see an instance right after this where Moses gets upset with him. And it's kind of unclear exactly why that is. So I want to address that real quick. There's kind of some different views on here, but I think what's going on is Moses sees that the sacrifice has not been eaten. The parts that are for the priests, Aaron has not eaten any of that. But Aaron says, no. I did the sacrifice for the people. I've done the things that I had to do, but I can't eat, right? Like, I am not going to eat right now when my son's just died. I can't do that. And I think this is something that was fine for Aaron, that this was acceptable in God's eyes for Aaron to do this, that he wasn't violating anything. Now, some people say Aaron did the wrong thing. Aaron should have eaten it. Because Moses does initially say you should have eaten it, right? But when he gives his answer, we see at the end of chapter 10, when verse 19, very end of chapter 10, and Aaron said to Moses, "Behold, today they have offered their sin offering and their burnt offering before Yahweh." So, no, we did that part. We did what we were supposed to do. "And yet such things as these have happened to me." So his son's dying. "If I had eaten the sin offering today, would Yahweh have approved?" And when Moses heard that, he approved. And Moses here is, remember, he's still God's representative. So I think Moses is concerned that things have not been followed as they should have been followed. But Aaron gives his response, and Aaron is, it seems, in the right. Moses recognizes, no, everything that should have been done was done. And this thing was not something that maybe it didn't have to be done. Maybe, yes, you guys can eat this, but maybe in certain circumstances you don't have to eat it. And Moses was okay with this. And if it's okay when he heard that, in his eyes it was fine, I think the implication here is that to God this was acceptable. So you may have another question, though, that we just skipped right over. What's up with this unauthorized fire, right? That this all happened because of that, right? What's up with the unauthorized fire? Now, some people will say, well, it was they were doing it the wrong way. Other people will say, actually, because it was that they were drunk. And by wrong way, it's not like the process was wrong, but what they were doing as far as being drunk while doing it, that was wrong. And the reason some people think that is because verse 8, right after all this happens, "And Yahweh spoke to Aaron, saying, Drink no wine or strong drink, you or your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, lest you die. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations." So he's saying, don't get drunk. Don't even drink during this part. And perhaps they were drunk, and this is kind of a law that now applies because, well, they did that and this was a problem, so now I'm going to add this stipulation to it. But at the very least, you don't need to be drinking the wine because you've got to be able to determine with a clear mind what you need to be doing. The very next verse, "You are to distinguish between the holy and the common, between the clean and the unclean. And you are to teach the people of Israel all the statutes that Yahweh has spoken to them by Moses." You can't be drinking and then doing this where you have a very important task where you have to be thinking very clearly and you have to be teaching other people as well. So it's really important that when you go in to do sacrifices that you are doing it in the right state of mind. And so it could be that they were drunk. It could just be that they just did it the way that God said, don't do this. Which he did say don't do this, actually. So it says they offer unauthorized fire with the incense that they had. Well, if we go back to Exodus chapter 30, we see in Exodus chapter 30, verse 9, "You shall not offer unauthorized incense on it, or a burnt offering, or a grain offering," talking about the altar of incense, "or a grain offering, and you shall not pour a drink offering on it." So he's saying, here's all the ways you don't do stuff with the altar of incense, and one of them is this unauthorized incense. Well, they took these censers that had incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire. So perhaps it seems like what they're doing, it's like disobeying what they already were told in Exodus chapter 30. So Exodus chapter 30 says, don't do this, and then they went and they did it. So that's something where they were told not to do something, and then they did something. And so it's not like, oh, well, I didn't know. It's not like, well, I how was I supposed to know that what I was doing was wrong? Well, you should have just been paying attention. You knew that was wrong. And so that's where we're going to wrap up this section, grim section, but a section that does show, yeah, God cares about holiness. He cares about things being done the right way. You need to do the things he says. You need to follow the way he says to do them. He cares about how things happen. We talked last time about how can worship look? What does that look like? And say a Sunday morning worship service. Well, it's definitely not the third category we mentioned, the whatever category. He cares. He definitely cares about how things are done, and we need to honor that, and we need to pay attention. And so that's something we can learn here, and we know that Jesus cared too. Jesus followed through on everything. Jesus fulfilled all the Old Testament. He was promised in the Old Testament this. He fulfilled all those things. He was sinless. He did everything exactly as he was supposed to, and therefore was a perfect sacrifice for us. Thank you for watching that video. I hope that it helped you learn a little bit more about the Bible today. And if you'd like to continue to learn more about the Bible, then we have plenty of other videos on the channel. And if this has been helpful for you, then you can always let me know by subscribing to the channel. And hopefully I'll be able to continue to help you learn even more about God's Word. Thanks.